In my opinion, there is no definition of what it means to be traditional. And the reason is simply because across cultures, we've had a wealth of lived experiences that has been passed down the generations, and therefore each culture would have what they consider to be a traditional set of behaviors or temperament expected of a lady or expected of a woman. Not everyone, in my opinion, myself included, was trained the way we should be. Most of the time, depending on what socioeconomic hierarchy or part of society you come from, it could be that you were trained on the roles of a woman, and most importantly, how you should conduct yourself as you face the world. On the other hand, if you were from a poorer background, the chances are very high that such training was not provided to you. But here's the point. Up until age 16 in the UK, or age 18 in the UK, and I believe across the world, your parents, your guardians, were responsible for you. From 18, you were responsible for yourself. Therefore, part of your experiences and learnings should have been about informing you of how to acquire the knowledge you need to get you from where you are to where you would like to be. What does it mean to be traditional? Well, across all cultures, irrespective of cultures, there are some behaviors, there are some gestures, there are some values that are perceived to be consistent with what are expected from a woman. Let me ask a few questions. Again, I'm not judging. You answer the questions for yourself. I might make a conclusive statement, but I'll let you decide for yourself. Do you welcome chivalry from men when you meet them? If you were walking into a shop and the doors are opening and the man is walking out and you're walking in, do you pause and wait for him to exit or to enter? Or do you just walk on? After all, we're all equal, which we are. But were you trained? Does it come natural to you to pause and wait and let the next person pass? Now, it doesn't have to have been a man. It could have been a person who was older than you are, or a person who is younger than you are. But is it instinctive in you to stop, to wait? Or is it natural for you to just say, I was here first, and after all, I'm a woman, and women should be given more of a priority, and you just walk on? If a man opens the door for you, do you see that as something to be admired? As a matter of fact, if you were walking into a building and there was a man with you, or a man entering the building, do you stop and expect him to open the door for you? Or does it come natural to you to open the door for yourself? If your answer was that you can do it yourself, then it means you're not quite traditional. I know that might sound, perhaps especially in the West, maybe not too acceptable. But histories abound with examples that the lady is meant to be preserved, nurtured, cared for, loved, protected, provided for. And even if you are able to provide for yourself, protect yourself, love yourself, care for yourself, instinctively, does it come natural for you to let a man you've just met, or a person perhaps that you know who is a man, to take a lead in making sure that they open the door for you and let you in? Or do you just steamroll yourself and keep going? That's the first. Number 2, can you cook? And by cooking, I am not referring to using a cookbook. Rather, do you have recipes off by heart that you've mastered over time and you've perfected such that you can prepare the meal for a family and each one would say, this is tasty? More importantly, do you have between 7 and 10 recipes off by heart? Do you enjoy cooking? If the answer is no, you don't enjoy cooking, and you don't have a recipe off by heart, it means you're leaning away from being a traditional lady. You're more of a modern woman. Another question. Let's say you are mature and you do not live with your parents. When you visit your parents, is it natural in you to go back to the kitchen and to support, to help, to prepare the meal for your father? Or do you just say, well, mum takes care of that anyway, plus, I'm married anyway, and my role is to serve my husband? Does it come natural to you to go into the kitchen and serve? Here's another one. How comfortable do you feel when serving the men around you? Especially the men that are not intimate with you or related to you. If you were to go to a party and the guests arrived, and you noticed that there was a group of people who had just arrived but had not been offered a drink, is it natural in you, assuming you know the person who is hosting or you're related to the person who is hosting, does it come natural to you to serve? If serving other people does not come natural to you, I'm afraid you're leaning away from being traditional. Next question. Amongst your siblings, when you were growing up, did you serve your brothers? Mom prepares the meal. You are in the kitchen with mom, helping to prepare the meal. The meal is prepared, is ready. It tastes good. It's time to serve. Your brothers sit on the dining tables. Do you sit with your brothers, expecting your mom to serve you and to serve your brothers? Or were you trained to serve your brothers, both those who were younger than you are and those who were older than you are? If your answer was you never served your brothers and you do not serve your brothers today, you're leaning away from being a traditional lady. These are assessments you're doing for yourself. I'm not judging you, but I want you to evaluate yourself so that we can understand precisely what is needed to ensure that we can get you from where you are to where you want to be. Here's a question. What is the difference between the food served in a 5-star Michelin restaurant in central London at 7:30 p.m. on a Saturday evening, and the food that the foxes eat from the bin, the garbage bin, at 11:30 p.m. on the same night. The difference, assuming it's the same food, the difference is presentation. So, my next question, were you trained in the art of presentation? How you present food to your father wants to drink water, how you present water to your father, how you serve him, the guests have visited, how you serve the guests, how you fold the clothes. Presentation, how do you present yourself, but how do you present what you're serving to those around you? Does it come natural? As a matter of fact, when you buy gifts for people and you have to wrap the gifts, how much attention to detail do you spend in making sure that it's presented beautifully? If the answer is very, very little, again, you're leaning away from being traditional. Now, let me ask you a question in terms of serving. If you were presented with a formal dinner table with all the cutleries and all the forks, the spoons, the knives, the plates, the bowls, the glasses, could you identify amongst all of the items which is the soup spoon, which is the dinner knife, which is the fork for fish, which is the fork for dinner, which is the butter knife? Could you identify on the table which is which? Which is the bowl for soup? Could you distinguish? Do you know how to use a napkin? If you don't, you were not trained to be a traditional lady. Now, depending on your culture, you may not have to know or learn all of what I've just shared, because your culture is different. But in every culture, the same table manners, the expectation applies. Another question. No, I didn't ask the question from the previous one. If you cannot identify from the furthest part of your right hand the cutleries and when to use each as you move towards the plate, or from the cutleries to your right and when to use each, if you cannot identify the glasses on the table, which is the glass for water, which is the glass for red wine, which is the glass for white wine, you weren't trained. Now, you may not have been trained at home, but you should have learned all of this. And the purpose for this question, or these questions, is: have you hosted an event where you had guests of between 10 and 15 from different walks of life, from various cultures, or perhaps from your culture? And how did you serve them? Did you just place the knives and the forks and say, well, and that's the jug of water, and people help yourself? Or was your presentation one to be remembered? Did people leave and say, that was an experience? The reason I'm asking these questions is, if your table manners and your knowledge of how to serve people and your knowledge of what is expected of you are almost non-existent, then it means you were not raised or trained in a traditional manner. Next question. Are you humble? Everyone believes that they are humble until they get tested. Are you nurturing? Does nurturing someone come natural to you? You were traveling You're dressed in a beautiful, beautiful, lovely dress. Perhaps you have a date. You're going on a date. On your way, you bump into a lady who is a mother. She's having issues. Maybe she has 2 kids, and one, she just says, well, can you hold my baby for me? What's your first reaction? Is your first reaction, oh, you're not traditional, you're not nurturing? Or is your first reaction is, oh, wow. Are you thinking about your dress first? Are you thinking about the fact that the baby might vomit on you? Are you thinking about, I don't like babies? You are not traditional. You're leaning away from being traditional because it means that the nurturing nature is quite weak in you. Not a value judgment. I'm not saying there's something immoral about you. I'm simply saying that if you were trained traditionally, if you were trained to serve, that would come natural to you. Most ladies, modern women today, were not trained. And that includes the men. We were not trained on how to serve. So we do not know how to behave when we meet people that we are supposed to serve. Another question. If I was to describe you, or if your friends were to describe you, which of the words would they say? Would they say, she is tough, she's emotionally resilient, she does not get emotionally hurt regularly, she's very dominant? If the answer was yes to all of those, you're leaning away from being a traditional lady. In your love life, if something were to happen to you, what is the first reaction you have? Is your first reaction to solve the problem in your love life? In your work life, is your first reaction to solve the problem yourself? If you have an altercation, you have an accident on the road, is your first reaction to handle the issue yourself? Or does the first thing that comes to mind to revert back to the hierarchy in your life and the people among or along that hierarchy who can solve the problem for you? Do you call daddy? Do you call your uncle? Do you call big brother? Do you call your husband? Do you call your brother, junior or senior? Do you call your male friends? What comes instinctively? I'm not asking what you did. I'm saying what occurs instinctively in your head. If the answer was, I can solve this myself, you are leaning towards and away from being traditional. I hope all of these are helpful. Let me bring this to a close. I'll use an anecdotal experience. I'll use an example. How do you start? Now, I've given you questions. I hope you've answered the questions. But the question that I would want to ask you is, knowing what you know now, if there was something you could change about yourself so that you can become more feminine or more traditional, would you? If the answer is no, I like myself just the way I am, then I wish you well. However, if your answer was, having listened to you, Mensa, I think there are a few things that I wasn't cognizant of, and there are a few things that perhaps I could get better at. We are always, and we should always be constantly trying to improve ourselves. This whole session was not to make you feel bad about yourself. It was meant to say, well, stop, pause, and ask yourself a question. Can I be better? Can I change? Now here is, in my opinion, what I consider to be the most significant disservice to women in the last 25 years. If you were to go to a bookstore or to a bookshop, if you were to go online and you were to search for blogs, books, recommendations, teachings, or even look for lectures about what it means to be feminine and to be a woman, in most and in almost every instance, the information is provided by women, not by men. But here is the dilemma. Ladies, with the exception of the few ladies who have specific sexual and intimacy preferences, for the rest of women, it is men who solicit your love, your attention, your care, and it is men who propose to you. So, from a business point of view, we are your clients. You do not go to a competitor to ask how to improve the service you're providing to your clients. The best way to get your service, your product, to be its best version of itself is to ask the person or the people or the clients who are consuming what you're producing. The purpose of this session is to say, from one person's perspective, just one person, I do not represent all men. I do not represent all black men. I do not represent all British men. I do not represent all men. However, I am still a voice, and what I would like you to do is say, okay, I've heard what you had to say. I don't agree with everything you said, of which I'm happy with. As a matter of fact, I would say, don't accept everything I've just said. Don't reject everything I've just shared. And please, don't neglect everything you've just heard. Take the information away, process the information. As a matter of fact, you can listen to the information a number of times and then ask yourself the question, for the goal that I want, the dream that I want, will this information he has shared help me achieve that dream or that goal? Because here is something I can promise you. If what I have shared today does not take you in the direction of your goal, it will take you away from your goal. It's up to you to decide how it helps you. I'll leave you with some recommendations. And these recommendations perhaps may not be possible for everyone, but it's worth exploring. My anecdotal experience. I like to dance. I like to dance salsa. I like to dance bachata. I like to dance kizomba. I always say to my female friends, you should learn how to dance. My recommendation to you is, ladies, modern women, you need to learn how to dance. Now, why is dancing important? I'm referring to specific types of dances. Dances where you have two partners and both of you are meant to dance as one. And the man is supposed to lead. Now, in my experience, every time I go dancing, I can tell you within some level of accuracy which of the women are single, which of them will remain single for longer, and which of them are either in a relationship or are likely to be in a healthy relationship. And you might think, how the hell? How can you from a dance? If you're dancing salsa, Cuban salsa, or if you're dancing bachata, but more importantly, if you're dancing kizomba, so in preference, I would say kizomba, salsa, bachata. If you're dancing kizomba or Cuban salsa, or what we call son, Cuban son, the man and the woman move as one. The man leads. If you're feminine, allowing a man lead comes very natural to you. And if you're traditional, allowing a man lead comes natural to you. When I started dancing very early, I was still a beginner. There was something I noticed. A certain group of women who were part of the class, we were learning together, who started the class with me, could not be led. They always had to correct the men. They always had to correct the partners they were dancing with. And it wasn't just myself. And you could see, after a few sessions, you could see the girls that the men enjoyed dancing with. Because they could lead them, although the men were still learning how to dance. Now the key thing is this: in relationships, a man should lead. The man will make mistakes. If it's natural in you to correct him every time he makes a mistake, your feminine attributes are very low and your traditional attributes are very low. Now, one of the best ways I learned how to dance very well and very fast was every time the class was over, we would normally have about half an hour just to dance and play around. I would always go to the teacher, the female teacher, because there was always a male and a female teacher. She was very attractive. She was gorgeous. She was very feminine. And when I danced with her, there was something I always observed. She allowed me to make my mistakes, and she just followed. Ladies, when you dance, even if you are a better dancer, you follow the man. If he makes a mistake, you don't correct his mistake, or you don't stop him on the dance floor and say, you've made a mistake, this is what you should do. You improvise. Now that is can be extrapolated to relationships. And here's the point I'm trying to make. By dancing with a very experienced teacher who allowed me to make my mistakes because I was still learning, I developed self-confidence and I learned how to dance. And I've seen over the years certain people come to dance, and I can tell from the first time they dance, two couples arrive, and I can tell just the way they dance that the man is frustrated. Not because he's learning to dance, but simply because his partner will not listen, be patient, and let him be the man. She wants to dance and take over. I always also notice something different. Ladies, if you are a dancer, and if you find it natural, and this occurs in most social dance scenarios where maybe there are too many ladies and fewer men, there are always some women who choose to dance like a man with women. That's not natural. It means your feminine attributes are very low. Let me say that again. Usually when you go to dance social events, the women usually outnumber the men. And sometimes you find that there are always some women who will then decide to dance as a man and choose a woman to dance with. There is nothing wrong with that if you're teaching, but if you're socializing, that should not be natural. That is not feminine. That is not traditional. So my recommendation to you is, you need to learn how to dance. I'll use one last conclusion, one example. A friend of mine, at the time I was dating, I took her dancing. Beautiful. Easy. So easy. So great. She enjoyed the dance. She made mistakes. She laughed, she played, she was a lady. She did not feel that she had to be dominating. She didn't feel as though her ego was being threatened. Now, on the same evening, she came with someone else, a friend. During the initial practice sessions, the teacher was teaching, and we would always swap partners. I paired with her friend. It did not take 30 seconds, and I concluded that she has very difficult issues with men. Why? It was her first time dancing. I grant her that. She spent the first few seconds complaining. She wasn't patient. She always had to be in control, not controlling me and leading me, but she could not accept correction from the female teacher. She could not accept that she was still a beginner and that she needed to learn to be patient and to just enjoy the dance. It's meant to be fun. After all, if it's not fun, why do it? We tried for a few seconds. It was hard. After 2 minutes, she said, I don't want to dance. She sat down. Now, she had tried to dance with 2 or 3 other people. The point I'm making is she was too masculine. She couldn't be herself. She couldn't be a lady. She couldn't enjoy the experience. She couldn't learn. She was a successful lady, very well educated, but she couldn't be in a position where she was vulnerable. Ladies, if you find that you cannot allow yourself to be vulnerable in areas and in places where you should feel safe, that is an indication that you're not very feminine and you're not traditional. In a place where there is safety, you should feel vulnerable if you're trying something new. But you shouldn't feel aggravated. I should say this. I know in the West, we're all educated. We all have our bachelors and masters and PhDs and all the accolades, and we're successful in our professions. But there's something beautiful about knowing how to play. Ladies, you need to learn how to play while still remaining feminine. Now, I hope all of those issues have been successful or have been helpful in showing you achieve, whatever success you might have. Now, I'll say this in conclusion. There is something inside of a man that draws us to you, ladies. It's instinctive, it's spiritual, it's mental, it's emotional, but we are drawn to you. You have to get comfortable in being the lady you were born to be. And let me conclude with this statement. If you've ever seen an attractive, beautiful, feminine woman in the presence of men, in other words, let's use an example, the gym. If you were to go to the gym and you see men training and you took an attractive, gorgeous, feminine woman and you placed her in the same area where the men are training, you notice something very, very quickly. The performance of the men increases. As a matter of fact, in martial arts, when I train, you can observe it. When I train, and if I'm teaching, I can observe it. A beautiful, attractive girl joins the class. The boys, who were just casually sparring, suddenly start to perform their best. Why? Because it's instinctive. There's something instinctive where we feel that we want to show our best selves because we believe you might choose us, or we believe you might look favorably in our direction. So there is something inside of men that draws us to you. What repels us away from you is when you try to be us. We are naturally disagreeable. Ladies, you should be naturally agreeable. It's not hard. We do not have to compete every time. There should be peace. As a matter of fact, the lady should bring peace into an environment. Peace, inspiration, grace, and a culture, a behavior. She raises the standard. And that's the reason why a woman can take a man who is not trained, and the man raises his standard because he realizes that the lady needs to be nurtured, cared for, preserved, loved, and catered for. So I hope this has been useful. Remember, the more feminine you are, or the more feminine traits you have, the more it helps you in every single engagement you might have with the outside world. Business, your relationships, your community, your local network. The more traditional you are, the more advantages you have in making sure that the man's experience with you and of you is memorable. A man should draw inspiration from you. A man should feel that he has the care, the love, the attention, the support from you. And in many ways, one way to demonstrate all of that is by remaining traditional and knowing how to serve. There is a statement that I would recommend you try not to make. That statement is, when I find the right man, then I'll be traditional towards him. There is a saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. So when I judge you, for example, we go out for a meal and we sit down, you're well dressed, you look beautiful, you look your best self. I don't judge you based on how you respond and react to me. I judge you based on how you respond and react to those who are serving us, and how you respond and you react to the men or the people that we encounter along the way. Those who are feminine and those who are traditional are very consistent. There is a minimum level of consistency you find. Those who are not, what you tend to find is that their femininity and their traditional nature stays very low, and they work overtime when they meet someone that they believe that they find attractive or that they would love to bond with. Now, let me close with two examples, biblical examples. There's a story about in the Old Testament where I believe it was Isaac. Isaac is trying to choose a wife for his son. I believe, I could be wrong. Isaac is choosing a wife for his son. He sends his servant to a location and he says, I want you to go and I want you to find a wife for my son. The servant arrives with his camels and he stops by the well. And he says to a lady he meets at the well gate, he says, I'm thirsty. Do you mind drawing water for me so that I can drink? Now, this woman had never met this man. She responded positively, respectfully. She drew water from the well and he drank. What she did next is what I think most women should try and study. He had 12 camels. Now, you have to understand how much a camel can drink to understand what she did was incredible. She drew water to feed every single one of those camels until they were satisfied. From my calculations, it would have taken her roughly more than 4 hours, 4 hours or more, to feed all the camels, going back from the well and feeding the camels. But she did that to a stranger that she had never seen, never met. Why? She was trained properly. She was feminine and she was traditional. Now, when she had fed all the camels, the servant said, if this woman can be this graceful to a stranger she's never seen, then she will be the one, she will be the wife of my master's son. One example. I'll give you another example. In the Old Testament, there are so many opportunities and examples you can choose from. But one of the things that I liked was a story of a princess or queen called Vashti. And she was a queen to the king. And on one of the occasions, the king had a celebration, and he had a banquet, and he had friends, and he had too much to drink, like we usually do, most men. And he got drunk. And unfortunately, like we do, sometimes we do not hold ourselves to high esteem. So he asked his wife to dance for him, the queen. And she disrespected him, the king, in the presence of everyone else. The next morning, he decided that he needed a new wife. So he went in search for a new wife. And a lady called Esther was the one who was eventually chosen. Now, she had to go through a process because she was from the poor part of the community, and she had to be trained and taught and guided and taught how to be feminine and taught how to be traditional, but also, most importantly, she was taught the etiquette of how to behave in the presence of the king. Further down the line in the chapter, an opportunity came where she wanted to ask for favor from the king. The manner in which she presented her request was so befitting of a lady that the king granted her request. But more importantly, she made such a request at a time when perhaps the king was not deserving of the honor that he should have been deserving of. The point I'm making is, ladies, you do not give honor when honor is due. You give honor because it is something you afford to a position. So, for example, you're not respectful to the man on the street because he demands that you respect him. You're respectful to the man on the street, irrespective of his socio-economic status. You're respectful to every man because it's in your nature and because you were trained. Now, if that does not come natural to you, it means that you're leaning away from being feminine and you're leaning away from being traditional. Now, guess what? All skills are learnable. So if there's something you want to learn, if you have the passion, the drive, if you're willing to pay the price, you can learn. The price will have to be paid in advance, and the price must be paid in full. And recognize something. In order for you to change your habit, it's something you would have to do consistently for at least 100 days. You need practice. How do you start? Start with your local environment. Start where you are. And change every day. As a matter of fact, ladies, you pay for a personal trainer, you pay to go to school, you pay for all of your clothing. There's nothing wrong with finding a woman who can teach you some of these skills, because it's something you would need. I hope that's been useful. And If he has, I wish you all the best.